Good evening, everyone. My name is Weston Clark. I am the Director of Community Outreach for Mayor Mendenhall at Salt Lake City. I'm excited for this conversation tonight because ever since I came into City Hall with the Mendenhall administration, even before the pandemic, Mayor Mendenhall has been pressing all of us to focus our attention on issues of equity in our city. Then, just a couple of months into our work, before I knew everyone's name, we were all working from home on our computers. In a rush to help any way we could, we began asking the community to go to websites for updates on COVID-19 information, asking those in need to go to the internet to fill out forms for financial support and unemployment. And as a dad, I know this all too well. We asked our kids to continue their education from a computer at home with hopefully fast enough and stable enough internet to keep them connected. Rightfully so, digital equity and digital inclusion became a topic of daily conversation, and we knew we had work to do. Already existing divides in our community greatly deepened by this lack of connectivity to resources, jobs, education, and community. While we've been working hard over the course of this pandemic to address some of the issues within the city's purview, including passing a digital equity policy just a couple of weeks ago, which will serve communities and individual residents in Salt Lake City by assessing current access information and communication technologies throughout Salt Lake City and within key demographics, geographic areas, and social groups, assessing, creating, promoting, and spreading digital literacy tools and education initiatives, and identifying community leaders in all industries who may help to narrow the digital divide in Salt Lake City and promote the city's vision for a more equitable digital landscape. More needs to be understood and more needs to be done. So tonight, I am excited to help kick off a community conversation series in partnership with our friends at the Salt Lake City Public Library in a very COVID appropriate and, considering the topic tonight, an ironic way. It is now my honor to welcome our moderator, who will introduce you to our panel and help guide our conversation this evening, a community treasure, executive producer, and host of KRCL's Radioactive, Lara Jones.
Thank you very much, Weston. Community treasure. Woo! Life goal. Thank you so much, everybody, for taking some time out of your busy day, busy life, and joining us for this community conversation. Radioactive and KRCL has done quite a few with the Marmalade branch of the City Library, and we're very honored to continue the tradition tonight. We have several panelists who are going to share their perspectives on this issue, from policymakers to student that's living it, to school board, to the city chief information officer. And we're going to ask everyone to introduce themselves briefly, kind of give their bona fides, as well as answer this question at the same time. And what does digital inclusion mean to you? I'd like to start with Shauna Edson of the City Library, where Shauna is the digital inclusion coordinator. Hi, Shauna, how are you?
Hi, doing well, thank you.
So what does digital inclusion mean to you? And tell us a bit about yourself.
So digital inclusion to me means that everybody has access to the technologies they need to live, and learn, work, play, and communicate. That's in a nutshell. My job at the City Library is a digital inclusion coordinator. I work with a team of folks from all of our locations, and we work to address digital inclusion in our community. And we work with community members as well as community partners. I'm also the chair of Utah Communities Connect, which is a digital alliance for the state of Utah. And we work with the community at large, several nonprofit organizations, community-based organizations, internet service providers, policymakers, academics, all working together to address the digital divides.
Great. Thank you so much. We'll hear more from Shauna Edson, I'm sure, throughout this conversation. I'd like to go next to Aaron Bentley, Chief Information Officer at Salt Lake City. Tell us what your role is and how big an issue this has become for you as the Chief Information Officer, as you explain digital inclusion and what it means to you.
That's great. I think it's a little unfair that Shauna got to do the first explanation because she nailed it. So sure, my name is Aaron Bentley, Chief Information Officer for Salt Lake City, which sometimes gets confused as the person you call whenever you have a question, like happened today. But But really, chief information officers for cities as well as companies are those that are in charge of technology, internally and externally facing. And I would say that is a change in our role over many years. Historically, we made sure that the servers computed and that the city employees had the technology they needed to do their work. And now over the last few years, that's a big change in our role. That's become where we are not only helping our employees, but helping all of the community. And obviously, we've done a good job of historically bringing things online. But when we did that, we failed to consider what happens when I need to request a face mask, and the only way to do it is online, and the only way to do it is in English. That's a real case that happened in Utah, and that was shared with me from one of my friends at the University of Utah. So these are the things that have come to front in the industry I'm a part of, is how do we now step outside of our normal box and maybe our introvert box, and step out and look and see how we can help others and how we can bring the community together and catch up those that are behind or have never had the chance to have this in their lives.
Yes, I read with interest in this digital equity plan that you sent over to me, Aaron, before we started, that a certain percentage of Salt Lake City employees have digital inclusion issues, because who's thinking about the part-time seasonal worker? Well, what if you have to submit your hours online? I'm not saying that that's how that works, but everybody needs access. And we'll get to the question of whether or not this is going to become a utility that needs to be thought of in that light. So Aaron, thank you so much. You've got a lot of questions or information to contribute to this conversation. I'd like to go next to Jacob Brace, Google Fiber's Government Community Affairs Manager. Hey, Jacob.
Well, thank you. And Laura, thanks for being the moderator tonight. I'm a little gun shy because I prefer your radio version where people don't see me. So,
I always take a screen grab, man. So we're still going to do that.
But I am thankful that I got to go before Bridget, because I'm already going to call it right now. She's going to be the star of tonight. So I'm thankful to be among the group that's here, and actually to work with a lot of them in the field of digital inclusion. And not that I want to speak for Shauna, but I think Shauna and I probably are just so ecstatic that digital inclusion is getting the attention that it is getting right now. Now, we're not ecstatic under the circumstances that it is receiving this attention, right? So at Google Fiber, we've, since our inception in 2012, have been practicing and living the digital inclusion kind of moniker of the three-legged stool, which is access to the internet, devices, and then skills, or your digital literacy online. And those are in pursuit often for education, employment, and entertainment. And this is kind of the new world that we live in, but we've known this now for a decade. And then I also just want to make a kind of a journey of the language that we'll use tonight, right? So we've already heard digital divide, which was kind of that first recognition of the have and have nots, which is the kind of language. And I wish Dr. Joy Pierce were with us tonight. So I will promise not to try to channel her, because I won't do it justice, but the digital divide is kind of that root of the acknowledgement that there are have and have nots in terms of access to the internet and the skills and devices. And then you get into this digital inclusion, which is this step, right? Digital inclusion is this recognition of internal and external needs to improve our way of using technology, accessing technology, and where and how. And ultimately, that step hopefully gets us to digital equity. And that is something that I think we're striving to do. And that's a way for entities, organizations, households to work internally on equal footing, and then also to reach others externally on equal footing. And so I want to commend Salt Lake City for their resolution and policy on digital equity, the first of its kind in Utah. And I think it will go in a long way of helping us continue to proliferate this message. So again, excited to participate tonight, and thank you so much.
And that is Jacob Brace from Google Fiber. We're going to go to Nate Salazar now, who's on the Salt Lake City School Board, represents Precinct 4, which is the downtown area. And Nate, we had acts of God come to fruition and bring pressure on this whole issue. I mean, COVID, of course, but an earthquake and a windstorm messing with equity. When you send a bunch of folks home and tell them to get online to do school, and you don't have enough devices, your internet's slow, it's a mess. So I'm hoping you can kind of give us a lay of a land here too, as you introduce yourself and your background and talk about digital inclusion in your life.
Certainly. Yeah, there's no doubt that, 2020 has come with its elements that are unprecedented. And, and that was the toughest part for us in the first week of school, to experience the windstorm that we did, because it knocked out power for half of our city. Many of my friends, including my sister, was without power for about a week. So for an all remote and online delivery of education, to have that first week of school be one with half the city, without, power and without internet, it made for a really tough week. So we had to cancel most of that first week of school. So that was a challenge. There's no doubt about it. And we're certainly living in a challenging time. But I know my colleagues on the board, people in the district, folks at this event tonight with us as panelists and who are watching, are all engaged in this work with us. And that's the beauty of what we do, not only as a city and as a community, but as a school district as well. Certainly want to extend the thanks to be here with you all tonight. As you mentioned, Laura, I serve on the Salt Lake City School Board. I currently serve as the vice president of the board as well. And we got a lot on our plate. There's no doubt about it. And if I could, kind of emphasize what others on the panel have discussed about what digital inclusion is to me, it's an equity that we need to make sure that everybody has a chance and a stake in the game, and the ability to connect, the ability to have devices. Jacob and Shauna and Aaron have said it perfectly, that it's about learning skills as well. It's about making sure that people are connected and have the opportunities to learn so that they can participate and grow in their own space and their own lives, so that they can, make sure that they're contributing to their families, to their own livelihoods, and back to our community. So closing the digital divide, as Jacob talked about, working on the deserts in our community where internet's hard to get or non-existent. These are all pieces that we're working on as a school district, as a city, as a library, community partners, like Google Fiber and Jacob, we're all making this happen. And, it's exciting to see that it is getting the attention that it deserves. But really it's about making sure that everybody's connected and has the opportunity and to succeed. And I believe in this modern day and age, that digital piece of it and the connectivity to our internet is crucial.
It's Nate Salazar from the school board. Might have to have you put on your other hat as the adult services coordinator for the city library, because with the city libraries getting shut down due to COVID, a huge resource for folks who had access challenges went away, although they reopened, I believe, last week for express services, including 30-minute sessions. So we might have to have you update that for us. And now, Bridget Raimundo, student at 3 schools simultaneously. I want to hear about that. But I also want to know how digital inclusion has affected you, or how it's played out in your life as a student and trying to, get that education that can take you places. Bridget, welcome.
Thank you for the welcoming introduction. I want to start off with thanks for all the panelists who are showing such incredible enthusiasm and support for the voices of young students. About your question, in what has changed in education, well, I am constantly being told that I am living through history, and that's kind of difficult to understand and believe when nothing like this has ever happened before in my lifetime. It's kind of the new normal. So my name is Bridget Raimundo, and I'm a junior in high school right now. As Miss Laura mentioned, I go to 3, 4, 5-ish schools, so I have a pretty good grasp on what virtual learning is like. I want to be able to answer all of your questions honestly, perhaps too honestly, about what is going on and how students are coping. Thank you.
All right, Bridget, we're going to stick with you. I have some younger nieces and nephews. Some feel this is great. I didn't like school anyway. So if I can do school in my bedroom or my school office, great. We've also heard of challenges for folks getting signed on. So what has been the biggest hurdle for you? Also, maybe point out some do's and don'ts for the grownups that are on this panel.
The biggest thing about adjusting is getting to know your online resources. Since we're not in school, there's much less help on homework and just the lesson plans. So we need to look online to get that type of help. And for the adults, I would really appreciate it if they made a space for students in their houses to be able to study in a quiet and peaceful environment. I hear a lot from my peers that they are being pushed to do household chores in the middle of, say, calculus, and that can make learning really, really difficult.
It's like, you're like, Mom, I'm at my job. It's called school. Bridget, what's your day like? Can you kind of give us a day in terms of signing on, when you sign on, connectivity issues? Do you have other siblings in the house or parents who need to use the computer for work? Is there a challenge for the device time?
Yes, so I'm actually using internet that my school provided for me, and there are about 8 people in my house. So they all use internet about at the same time in the middle of the day when I'm in my Zoom classes, and that can cause problems. Beyond that, I have 2 younger siblings, and they are in their own classrooms, and they'll ask for help since those teachers are not able to direct their attention towards specific students. So right now, older siblings and parents, I'm sure, are taking responsibility beyond our own, workload.
Talk about having to do a little bit of everything. Nate, let's go back to you over at the school board and what you're hearing, because I understand as of Monday this week, the school district has seen a 94.3% connectivity or login rate, which sounds a lot better than what I was hearing with 3,000 students missing in logging in right as the windstorm was hitting.
Yeah, for sure. We've made a lot of progress, and it's a learning experience. Just as we're trying to educate, our students in the community, we're also learning a lot ourselves as adults, as school board members in the community. But I'm encouraged to see that kids are logging on, that they're connecting, that they're engaged in learning in their classrooms and with their teachers. That doesn't mean that it doesn't come with its challenges, and those are the learning opportunities that we have. How do we do this in a way that celebrates the profession of education and teaching, and celebrates our amazing professionals, and how do we also do this in a way to make sure that kids are getting the education that they deserve under the unique circumstances that exist with this pandemic and everything else going on that you alluded to in our community. So yes, we're highly encouraged with the connectivity rate that we're having, and it's more or less on course for pre-COVID attendance rates. So even that is a subjective thing to say, and I'm not going to say it doesn't come with its challenges, but it is nice to see that there is some correlation between attendance in previous non-COVID years and what we're experiencing now in a remote setting.
Does every student have their own device now? I was reading and hearing the stories before school started about the lack of devices, the back order for devices, the call for the community to donate devices.
Yeah, there is no doubt that us and many other districts experienced that backlog, and it was more or less just everybody around the country, ordering computers to get ready for the school year. I'm happy to say that we've fulfilled every request for a computer through every school, through every principal in the Salt Lake City School District, and starting next week, we're actually going to have an excess of computers. So to answer your question, we're still not one-to-one, meaning that every student has a device, but we're pretty well caught up on making sure that every family has a device in their home. And starting next week, we can start to make sure that every student has a device. So we'll have an excess of about 3,500 computers. Hopefully next week, that's what we're hearing with the orders that we're waiting on, to make sure that we can start filling that one-to-one gap, and that students, as Bridget mentioned, each student in a household has their own computer to participate in their education.
Before school shut down in the spring due to COVID, I was, sent people home rather. I was reading about other school districts around the country putting hotspots on school buses and parking them in neighborhoods. I'm not sure if Salt Lake City did some of that too, but as Bridget said, she has got a hotspot or connectivity because of one of her many schools. So how is that going in terms of making sure not only do students have devices, but they've got connectivity?
Yeah, for sure. And we experimented with all those things that you mentioned. You know, we had hotspots on buses, and you know, coordinated those in neighborhoods where we know we have a lot of kids, or around apartment complexes like the Park Place apartment just across the street from me in my own neighborhood. You know, to make sure that we could connect kids. It is difficult because there's also an infrastructure piece that I'm really excited and encouraged that the city's working on that with their new policy to close some of those infrastructure pieces as well. So it's a true partnership between just about everybody, as Jacob mentioned on this panel, to make sure that kids are connected. We have a number of programs, thanks in large part to, again, the people on this panel and our Salt Lake Education Foundation in a partnership with Google Fiber. Donated money for us to have hotspots that are available for students. We have a partnership with Comcast. We have over 1,000 licenses, so that if there are students in our schools who do not have internet, you know, we can connect them with a hotspot. Or if they'd like another service like Comcast, they can reach out to their counselor, to their principal, and we can give them a code that the school district's paying for that internet. You know, so we're really excited that we have these types of partnerships. We're doing everything that we can to make sure that our kids are logged on, that they're engaged, and that they're participating.
Let's talk about digital navigators and digital deserts. Shauna Edson from the City Library Digital Inclusion Coordinator. Can you kind of give us an overview and then get a little specific about what's happening in our community when it comes to digital deserts and digital navigators?
Yeah. So the Digital Navigators program came to be as a response to all of our library locations, our public computer labs shutting down last March. And we realized that we still needed to provide those essential services to community members that were no longer able to come in and utilize those public spaces. So the idea behind Digital Navigators is that it's a model that combines both opportunities for in-person interactions in public computer labs. Like you said earlier, the Salt Lake City Public Library opened for express services last Monday, and that includes 30-minute computer sessions. So right now, as long as we're able to stay open and do that, we can work with people in person. It also incorporates other ways of interacting with people to build access through a call-in number. So we have our main call-in number, and we can connect individuals with a digital navigator, and they will work with them to address finding internet options for both hotspots and home internet, locating devices, as well as that key component of digital literacy skills. So how to use the computer in a way that's meaningful and relevant for the individual.
What's the number? There's a phone number.
That will launch. It's not launching yet. We will launch our direct service on December 1st. But I will find the number. You can, right now the library has a more simplified version of that. We have a tech help number that you can call in, and I'll get that for you. And so folks can call in and set up a half-an-hour session to talk with one of our computer lab staff members and work with them. You can call and we can set up a Zoom or Google Meet, so to do a screen share to help with that as well.
But
So,
I'm concerned about digital deserts around libraries now. Like you said, the city library system is reopened as of a week ago Monday, but so it's like a mini desert, I guess, around the library branches now. How concerned are you about the effect of COVID, of the windstorm, of all this on digital deserts?
I think it highlights the issue that has been here all along. It's now a matter of public safety and staying healthy, to be able to stay home and do work remotely, do your schoolwork remotely. So I'm very concerned about it. This Digital Navigator program includes funding for ways to either get individuals free or low cost devices. It's a partnership with the Institute of Museum and Library Services. So we'll be releasing more information about that soon. But yeah, it's pretty high on our priority list right now.
Okay. Let's go to Jacob Brace from Google Fiber. Google Fiber, just one of many options. We live in a free market, but the way you enter a community is a little more consumer facing, I feel, in terms of attacking these issues of digital deserts and digital inclusion. Is there anything in particular that you want folks to know about Google Fiber and the way you work to find these digital deserts and problem solve?
Yeah, Laura, you phrased the question interestingly. I'm not sure that we chose a market based on a digital desert or the quantity of such areas. But when we are welcomed into a community by the metro, by the residents, we certainly acknowledge that there is the areas that have been traditionally left out of telecommunication builds for whatever reasons, and areas that were built to first. And one of our commitments when we move into a city is to not have that mentality of a build out. We are building out an organic fiber optic network, which is a large scale process and undertaking for the city as well as for the residents as we move through the streets building out. We're predominantly underground now in our build. And in fact, the windstorms really didn't knock us down as much as it knocked down the power, which is how it disconnected folks. Our lines were still pretty much intact. And so if you had a generator, you actually could have connected to our internet on fiber optics. And so when we're in the cities and they tell us where the unconnected or the more likely disconnected individual communities are, that's when we say, well, how do we work with that community and all of the partners of that said city to change that? Because a single provider cannot do it. There's just no way, right? So from a business economic standpoint, you're not going to be able to do it by yourself. From a social service, you're not going to be able to do it by yourself. And so you do have to work with others. And Nate started to highlight how, some pressures that we would love to see, and the COVID pandemic has created this opportunity for Salt Lake City School District to even start recognizing its own need for a digital equity policy, right? Akin to what the city has been doing. But they welcomed a group of providers who would normally be seen as competition come together as a collaboration and say, how do we start to give in a way that is organized and starts to build those supports of the three-legged stool of access, devices, and skills to make sure that students have a seat at a real education opportunity. And that's important. We can't point fingers. We can't play blame games. We can't expect some other entity or solid, isolated entity to solve the problem, because they're actually limited in their perception of what the problem is. And so we work with communities on this. And from the get-go, it is a fair marketplace, and we want more competition, drives prices down, increases speeds, which is absolutely imperative in this industry, and creates a wider array of options and internet access. And I think we are driving that.
Let's talk about infrastructure. Aaron Bentley, Chief Information Officer over at Salt Lake City. This is a market fight, so to speak, among providers. So what is the city doing to drive those infrastructure investments? I am mindful that Mayor Mendenhall created some agreements to provide public Wi-Fi at an LDS church house in Rose Park. That ends today, perhaps.
Yes.
The Sorensen Community Center, Glendale Connect is what it's called. That is now permanent. You can get the public Wi-Fi there. But again, a place you have to go and gather during COVID. So what's the infrastructure plan here in Salt Lake City under Mayor Mendenhall?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's also a complex question, as Jacob has mentioned. So, and it'll probably go into some conversations later on as internet as a public utility. Mayor Mendenhall and the City Council, when this recently awarded through budgets funding to create a public Wi-Fi network in public places. So it's a little tricky for me to go and put Wi-Fi down a street, residential street, and there's things that would need to be worked out, because then I'd be competing with Jacob and Google and others. Some interesting things we've seen outside of Salt Lake City is San Antonio, in particular, has a great fiber network for their utilities, and what they have just agreed to do is say they're connecting the students to the school network through that. And I could see that being a reasonable option where we're saying we're using city infrastructure for specific purposes for the students. But obviously this digital equity thing doesn't, it's not just for the children, right? It's for everyone. There's many people in the city of all ages that are affected by this. And so that's one of the things we need to look at. So when this first happened in March, Mayor Mendenhall and I were on a phone call, and she said, how do we tackle this quickly? The schools have shut down. The senior citizen centers have shut down. The libraries have shut down. And that's when her and I hopped on a call with the presiding bishopric for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And we presented to them a pilot, which is called Rose Park Connect. And for the last 2 months, volunteers from that area and from throughout the city have been giving of their time freely to allow people to come into a community room there. The city provided some computers, the church provided the room and internet access, and then the community members volunteered as digital navigators. At first, I think they thought they would just be greeters and help people to get on, and it's turned out that they learned how to be tech specialists and do all sorts of things. Already in the works before that, we had what is called, was over at the Sorensen Unity Center, and we were building out a network there. One of the tricks that happens is libraries close, coffee shops close. But what happens if you're a day laborer and you get home at night and they're all closed and you still need to go pay the bills? So if you were to go to the Sorensen Center now and pull up in the parking lot and around that campus, there's open public Wi-Fi there. And that's what we call City Connect. And that's the goal that the City Council and Mayor recently funded, was that project to build out public Wi-Fi in public places.
So the City Council approved $75,000 to build out this public Wi-Fi. What comes after Glendale Connect?
We are working on that right now. We actually have City Connect downtown at Plaza 349. It's a city office building, which we've now converted into one of our youth cities. So if you were to walk out in front of this building, you'd also have it. And also the library has recently is in the process of expanding their Wi-Fi out. So we're in for City Connect. We're working with community partners and identifying those places. If I could pan my laptop around, you'd actually see out on the light post out my window, we have a Wi-Fi hotspot as well. So we're looking at using light posts and creating mesh networks to expand that out.
So we're going to get to Q&A from those of you who are joining us for tonight's panel discussion. Please use the Q&A function, or if you're watching, listening on Facebook, you can also submit your questions there and they will get through to me to put to the panel. So Shauna, as we're talking, I'm thinking about this. We have public streets. We have the model of this public access on our darn streets. So what is the leap we need to take to get a little more everywhere for access, Shauna? I mean, do we have the model of, we talked about buses, school buses, expanding Wi-Fi hotspots throughout the community. What about a partnership with UTA?
There have been different projects all across the country to work on things like that. One of the most popular is the Wi-Fi on school buses going around. There's a lot of things that need to be addressed as far as there's different policies in different cities. We can do different things. So I think it's a matter of being able to appropriately address what we're actually allowed to do and the needs of the community, and figure out where those opportunities and gaps are. But it really takes a whole community to work together to look at this on a community level. Hotspots are a great Band-Aid approach to digital equity, but there's some areas that are digital deserts where hotspots also don't work because cell phone coverage is bad.
Oh,
So,
talk about that a little bit more, would you?
what
parts of the city? I mean, when it comes to looking at the city as a giant map, where is it red and where is it green?
So we actually don't have that giant map right now. I would love to say that we do, but we don't. So what we're trying to do is piece together people's experiences, feedback from individuals as to where they're not being able to use hotspots, where they're not really able to access a strong internet speed, and things like that. So I don't know if Jacob or Aaron might.
Let's go to Jacob Brace, and then we'll go to Aaron, then Nate. Jacob, Google
So,
Fiber.
specifically to the map, or I mean, I have a lot to say right now, Laura. And
Well, I would love you to back up to something you said as we were prepping for this conversation. Your experience with deserts in general, as was it Neighborhood House or NeighborWorks that you were with?
House, yes.
Neighborhood House, and you're familiar with grocery deserts on the west side too. There's all kinds of a lack in our community, not just west side, but different pockets.
Absolutely, and ironically, or at least coincidentally, Neighborhood House would have been considered a desert to a hotspot as well, because cell service in that Poplar Grove kind of area along the Jordan River wasn't the greatest, depending on who your provider was. And so, it's interesting. We also provide some investment with our assets in terms of bringing Google Fiber product to community organizations. We have what are called community connections, and they receive a free gigabit connection to be able to use in their services and reach out into the public. And we have 6 of those in Salt Lake City, and we're going to announce one here in 3 weeks or so, which will be exciting. We also have investments in apartment housing complexes in partnership to Utah Nonprofit Housing Corporation, where each unit has an access point of free gigabit service to our fiber internet. And so those are, a good piece of this gigantic puzzle of solutions. In general, though, Aaron did mention San Antonio. That is an asset of fiber optics that is in the municipality's purview to use. It's often used for emergency services and respondents, but it's an infrastructure that's been there for decades, right? We also have in Utah a really strong network built by UENT, so the Utah Education Network and Technology, which is for public schools and access there. It's a fiber network that nearly stretches from the north to the south and actually is getting further into the rural area than most other providers are. However, it's locked up just for that educational resource, which means that it's really only accessible 181 days and for a limited 8 to 10 hours a day during those 181 days. So what I find really interesting is how COVID has forced us to come together and solve some problems in ways that we have been trying to solve them through bureaucratic channels over a long period of time, right? Like, so one-to-one devices in schools. I can tell you right now that there have been grants written by teachers, by principals, by districts over the last 5 to 10 years to try to get more devices in. And here in less than 6 months, Salt Lake City School District will have solved the one-to-one issue without any of that type of hurdle. So when motivated, we can channel existing infrastructures. We can channel our resources in a way to solve these problems. That's not to say they're just easily done during pandemic times. It takes a lot of effort, right? And it does cost money. There's no doubt about that. There is a lot of resource going into this. I guess the point, though, is it's possible to fill in those deserts. It's possible to create access points that are Band-Aid to long-term solutions. And I'm hopeful that we will all continue to work there, current pandemic and post-pandemic.
Okay, hold on. I think I can't remember who I said was next, but I want to go to Aaron, because it sounds like just as we talk about trying to address the gap we have in housing units through zoning, that this issue needs to be applied maybe across the board with everything at the city. So I'm kind of curious your view on that and this new digital equity policy, how it's going to start to really embed itself in everything the city does, Aaron.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think Jacob brought some good information to this. The city, we can create, and really with the policy, that's what we did, is we create a framework, but this isn't a solution that we can solve on our own. It's going to take these community partners. It's going to take people who care to make a difference. we're not like San Antonio. We have a very small footprint when it comes to fiber. What we have is power lines and a great university and students around that can help us. And so as we drive things forward and as council and mayor and us as cabinet members talk, that's how we need to start transforming the way this looks and putting the money there. When we talk about digital deserts, when it really comes to high-speed internet, the numbers that I have and some tools that I have show that from that standpoint, there's not a lot of desert, but what there is a lot of lack of funding to add water to that desert to make it bloom. And right now we have CARES dollars and everything giving that money. My biggest concern is what happens when the pandemic's over and the money dries out. So can we get fiber, high-speed internet to every home? Yes. Can we get it to public places? Yes. But we need, as policymakers, as library, as the school district, as nonprofits, and as community members, that's where we have to come together and say, we're here to make this a change. Shauna, Jacob, everyone's been fighting this for years, but it just, where we've seen the success is with the money being here. So that's what we need, is the steady flow of money, so that here, next year when the CARES dollars dries up that paid for the hotspots or paid for the Comcast in your home or whatever it was, that we don't have people saying, okay, well, that was great, but now I'm dying again here. So that's what this is forcing is a community conversation just like this, and it needs to keep going. It needs to be people like Carlton Christensen saying, I'll open up my church. It needs to be those conversations with the UTA saying, yes, we have internet, but we only have it on the most premier of solutions, which is FrontRunner. If you're on a bus, but that's what we have to do, is come together as a community and say, we're in this for real, and we're not just going to shortchange it and say, well, CARES dried up, so sorry, you're out of luck. Go back to your prepaid phone plan.
So Nate Salazar from Salt Lake City School Board, there's a lot of one-time money, as Aaron reminded us, and you're getting close to that one-to-one on devices, but those devices age rapidly. So I'm kind of curious, there's infrastructure, there's continuing maintenance on devices. I send my kid to school. I'm speaking figuratively here. I don't have those kids. I expect that there's a desk for them. I think those expectations are changing faster than school boards and school districts are able to reprioritize or expand the budget. So maybe you can speak to that for us. And also a point that I wanted to make here, thank you, Jacob Brace. Glendale is listed by American Consumer Survey, FCC data, as showing greater than 20% unconnected households. So this is right in the school district.
Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing that up, Laura, because I think while we don't have that map and we can't identify specifically where, and as I've studied this over the years, and certainly in my time on the school board, getting ready for the decisions that we've had to make relative to remote learning and in-person learning as well, is that anecdotally it seems that these pockets, one, they're hard to identify. Right? They're very difficult to identify. So I don't envy the task that Jacob and providers and government entities like Aaron and everything Sean is doing. It's a difficult challenge that we're navigating, and there's no doubt that anecdotally we hear, as to your point from what you just said, that anecdotally we find that these deserts seem to exist on our west side, which is critical for us as a school board and as a school district, because half of our students live on the west side of Salt Lake City, right? So, how do we navigate decisions relative to safety, making sure that we have kids with a one-to-one device, and making sure that we're not leaving kids behind, right? That's the biggest thing, that keeps me up at night. It's my heartache right now is how do we not only fulfill our charge of delivering, a quality education to kids, but how do we also make sure that they're safe and that, our school district plays a role in maintaining safety for the greater community at large. Those are some of our challenges that we're up against with the district. Relative to the money, it's slim. We're in Salt Lake, and in all school districts in the state of Utah, we're funded through enrollment and the amount of students that we have. It's called the weighted pupil unit. And when we're seeing declines in enrollments, that's money that we're losing, and certainly saw a decline in enrollment here in Salt Lake District, but we're also seeing declines throughout the state. I was in a regional meeting with USBA last night talking about that very issue. You know, what is it that we need to do to make sure that our schools are funded? Do we need to relook at the WPU? Do we need to rely more on CARES money? And I'll be honest, that's a lot of where you know, our funding has come from to meet the need of devices in the hands of every student in Salt Lake City School District, mostly through CARES. You know, a huge thanks to, you know, the county, to the city, you know, everybody has contributed to us. We also qualified for a USBE CARES grant for $300,000, right? And all of that has gone into technology and making sure that our kids are connected. So and that's the importance of having that excess that I mentioned. You know, ideally next week we'll have that excess of 3,500 computers and devices. And then there's another round coming that brings us back to that 6,000 that we put in the order for this summer. So that when those devices do break down or when they need to be fixed or repaired, you know, you let your principal know, you bring your device in and there's another one waiting for you, right? So that one can be prepared and repaired, you know. So those are the things that we're looking at, but there is no doubt that, you know, the emphasis on funding and certainly the emphasis on partnership that you see even on this panel, right? Everybody on this panel, minus Bridget and myself, you know, are working hand in hand with the school district right now on our own digital inclusion committee to make sure that this is a community-wide effort.
All right, we're ready for questions, folks out there in Zoom land and Facebook. If you'll put them in the chat or Facebook in the comment, they will get funneled to me to put to our panelists. And Bridget, I've got one for you right here. Folks want to know what's going on. And let's see, from Chloe on Zoom. She asked Bridget, as public school is so challenging, do you think it is worth it to just go to school in person? So take that how you'd like, but you're doing all of your schooling at home right now, right? Over the internet.
I visited in person to a couple campuses. In my experience, it's been comforting to watch people wear their masks and wear them properly in school. And there's a lot of sanitation that's happening. But I also feel like it's not a very wise decision, especially with the cases that are rising in the student population in the young 20s and, you know, early teens. I also want to point out that it might not even be an option anymore whether you want to do online or in person. Enrolling my sisters in online school this year was actually more difficult than you would have expected with such an increase in demand for those classes.
So, sorry, I was trying to pull up the latest case count. I believe we're over 1,000 again in the state of Utah, confirmed COVID infections, and yes, seeing it rise among younger folks. Do you have any increased anxiety, Bridget, as a student trying to navigate all this? I mean, the pressure of making sure you're in the Zoom calculus class, you know, finding the resources yourself, or do you feel more resilient as a result of having to find so much yourself versus asking the teacher or your classmates?
It's a lot better to work from home. I think that much is pretty clear. It's a lot better than waking up at 7 in the morning, getting up, getting prepared, walking to your bus, finally arriving at school maybe an hour later, and then school starts in 20 minutes, stay there for 8 hours, come back home. Now, it's not too much better than what I'm dealing with right now, which I get up still at 7 in the morning. I take 30 minutes for breakfast and then getting prepared. Then I sit down at 7:30 and I don't get up until about 5 p.m. because I have classes for about 8 hours. And then after that, I have a couple after school commitments that are all online. And I also take dual enrollment through 2 different colleges, one, the University of Utah, and the second, Salt Lake Community College. Both of them are actually quite different. I would expect that universities would have a similar requirements, but they're actually quite different.
Do you feel like you've accepted this situation more readily than perhaps older folks like myself in terms of doing so much online, Bridget?
I don't know how you really get adjusted to this. I think my body is really taking a toll. I sleep 6 hours a night most every day of the week, and because I'm sitting so much, my scale has kind of gone through a roller coaster. I like will gain a lot of weight, and then I won't eat because I'm on my computer and I'm starving and I'm trying to like, you know, diet myself. So then the scale will drop, and it's just really not a healthy lifestyle at all. There's also a huge strain on my eyes, and you know, speaking socially, there are fewer people to talk to.
I was wondering about that. But at the same time, I think older folks look at your generation and go, you all live on your phone anyway. This is different, right?
Um, that also brings in the question of, does everyone really have a phone? Um, Speaking on a general level, most people do have phones. And for that reason, we will all assume that all of us have phones. But that creates a huge disadvantage towards people who don't have them. And I just recently got mine last year. Before that, I had to go to the libraries to finish all of my work within an hour before closing. So no, we are not on our phones all day. Now we are on our computers all day because we are required to, so that we can get a successful education and a good job.
Thank you, Bridget. Shauna, next question's for you, and it kind of follows from what Bridget just shared, and that's from Maureen on Zoom. What can we as individuals do to help in this effort? Does the library need digital navigator volunteers? Are there other ways to volunteer? We want to help, says Maureen. Shauna.
Yeah, I really wish there were more opportunities for community members to volunteer in this effort right now. But because everything is remote, it makes those volunteer opportunities even harder. We had people coming into our public computer labs to volunteer to help folks there. I think in the next few months, we'll be set up enough that we can welcome volunteers to come in and or remotely provide that assistance, but we just don't have the infrastructure to navigate that right at this time. But stay tuned. We will put out a call for volunteers as soon as we're ready for that. One thing that
I got the tech number for me. I see you sent that to me in our private chat. Share that with folks and how it works.
Yeah, so the number that you can call in is 801-524-8200. And you can set up an appointment to work one-on-one with the City Library Tech Help staff member. And those are available Monday through Thursday from 4 to 8 and Friday and Saturday from 4 to 6.
Now, are those in person, those 30-minute express sessions, or is this remote?
This is remote. So this is either over the phone or you can set up a Zoom or a Google Meets.
But you can still use that number too, I believe. And maybe Nate Salazar can put on his other hat and confirm that as we go back to him from the school board, but also adult services coordinator at the Salt Lake City Public Library. Those 30-minute sessions are going to be gold, I have a feeling, Nate.
Absolutely. You know, and we're still, you know, seeing some lower numbers in our first week, but I'm certainly sure as you know, we see more people coming through our doors, and as the community is more aware about what our library is offering right now, I'm certainly, you know, certain that we will see folks sitting on our computers again, utilizing that service and taking advantage of that. So yeah, we've as Shauna mentioned, we've been open for a week now at the library, and starting, you know, rounding out week 2 for us. So here coming up soon. So. But yeah, it's been a bit of a slow go, but I think that's also been a benefit to our staff and my colleagues who are working so hard, and everybody who's worked you know, really hard to make sure that we can open safely. It's been a monumentous effort for everybody at the library to make sure that we can offer and still be that anchor in that place, you know, where people, you know, can fulfill their needs in any given time, in any given day.
So we do have at least another hour, depending on the questions from those of you out there watching us on Zoom and Facebook. So go ahead and use the Q&A function or comment on the Facebook feed, and those questions will be funneled to me to put to our panelists as we continue this community conversation about digital equity. And I kind of want to back up maybe to the 10,000-foot view and ask a couple questions of our panelists about the barriers to getting everyone on equal footing when it comes to digital equity. Are there certain populations or communities that we see more digital inequities than in others? What are those compounding factors? Age, language, cultural barriers. I know, I'm the IT expert for my 84-year-old father, and we're translating through different generations, and I'm no longer on top of my game. So Shauna, maybe we can go to you. I'm guessing this is some of the things that you ponder as the digital inclusion coordinator at the City Library.
Yeah, there are some factors that, I think it's when you really look at intersections of different areas of individuals' lives. So race is shown to have a big impact on digital equity. And then as well as intersections of education level, income level, language level, sometimes everyday cultures, depending on the culture you're part of. Adoption and use of technology is different, and we find a lot of gender inequities there as well.
I remember at one point I had to tell my parents, you know what, I'm done reprogramming the TV remote. But that was 20 years ago. Aaron, anybody who'd like to speak to this, and maybe Bridget, do you translate tech for your parents or older family members? Bridget, like you were talking about earlier, you're perhaps getting interrupted to take care of more family business, but at the same time, are you seen as the IT expert?
I'm not sure about that. I think because I'm in classes most of the time, my family is less hesitant to come to me with questions about how to work with the technology because they put my education first. And talking about getting access to everyone for education, I think a huge role is finances. Because I live so far away from my school, it was difficult for me to get there on my own without a driver's license, to get my hotspot, my laptop, and I'm sure the same is said for tons of other students who live far from their schools and the resources that they offer. With all the budget cuts in education, I'm actually glad to see that we are moving towards online learning, since that will probably be the future of how we learn.
Nate, what are you seeing or hearing on the ground from parents and kids?
Yeah, certainly. And, I think from the school board side of things and an educational standpoint, the difficulties that I know we're having and are overcoming right now in Salt Lake are, how do we reach students who are part of our special education population in the district, right? It is very difficult to manage education virtually with students who struggle cognitively, right? Who need that extra support. So even in our own remote plan, I know we're majority online and remote in Salt Lake City School District, but the plan that we approved also, allows us to bring in small groups, right? And we can do that safely. We can do that with distancing. We can do that to make sure that, our special ed population, our students who come from refugee backgrounds, our ELL learners, all have that opportunity not only to succeed virtually, but to have that one-on-one instruction with their teachers and with the experts in their schools who they rely on. So when I think about barriers to the original question, it's certainly our vulnerable population and our students that I worry a lot about right now, and how do we meet their needs. And specifically, how not only how we meet their needs, but how do we make sure that they're having the same opportunities that they could be afforded, minus a global pandemic. And those are very difficult things that we're working on and overcoming right now, as I said.
Can you kind of go through the demographics of the Salt Lake City School District? Because I think that's an interesting reflection of what the city needs to look at. Absolutely.
So we are one of the most diverse school districts in the state of Utah. We're a majority minority school district. We're just about 60% ethnic minority, right about in that same 60% category of low socioeconomic status or students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. We have a brilliant and wonderful population of refugee students and special education students and ELL learners who are all mixed in those intersections that I just mentioned. And truly our school district is the epitome of what our community is all about, right? We look at our assets, we look at our strengths through our differences. And that's what I'm excited about, is that, you know, we're overcoming these challenges in so many different ways, through so many different channels, whether it's, you know, from the top at a school board or an administrative level in our superintendency and his cabinet, all the way down to our students like Bridget, you know, who are working day in and day out and proving that we can do this. And that notion of togetherness, that we do this together, is critical in everything that we do. So our diversity, our differences are our strengths in Salt Lake City School District. And we're proving that that we're meeting those needs and overcoming a lot. I mentioned we're learning a lot, and those are certainly components that we're facing right now in this digital world.
All of our panelists, save Bridget perhaps, have been looking at this issue for years, pre-COVID. COVID now adding some pressure and some one-time money from the CARES Act to address these issues. But where do we go from here? What are our next steps? Erin Bentley from Salt Lake City, the Chief Information Officer. The Digital Equity Plan addresses this, does it not?
Yeah, it sets the foundation for us. And I think the next steps are Salt Lake City begins a budget planning year here in the next few months. We start our fiscal year in July, but we plan very much ahead. And what that looks like for us and what Mayor Mendenhall has brought to the table as the mayor of the city is that we're one city and that we work as one city instead of 15 different companies, which I would say over my 20-year career here, I've seen a lot of. And so what that means is that moving forward, when we make decisions united that follow that vision of digital equity, of digital resiliency in Salt Lake City, and that we make decisions with community partners. There's a lot of great people out there who have gone before and tried this. Pete Ashdown's a perfect example. He brought public Wi-Fi to certain areas many, many years ago,
City
but
Park.
didn't get the traction that from the city to move there. We have traction now, and now we need to link arms. The school district, the university, all of us link arms and make decisions together instead of in our pockets. I can't make decisions, just IT decisions independently. I need to make that working with the public utilities department, with all the different departments as they tear up the roads. This is the time for us to put fiber into them. And so it's marching together, and that's what really we need to do next is to work together as a unified Salt Lake Valley and fix this. And as a state, we need the help of the state. You know, Bridget talks a lot about the funding, and Nate, this has to become serious. This has to be, you know, we talk about a utility. We have to have that type of mentality. Are we going to build a railway across the United States? Are we going to connect homes? It's not just Salt Lake City. All the CIOs that I work with across the United States and across the world. I was on a conversation today with people in Europe. It's the same issue, and it's time for us all to stand up and say, let's do it together.
Well, that brings me to this question, and that I'd like you all to address as we do some closing statements and wrap up our community conversation on digital inclusion. And Erin, we'll just start with you, and that is, should the internet be a public utility? And any thoughts you'd like to share on that? Erin Bentley.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the right answer for that, to be honest, but I believe that every person in the United States and across the world should have the equal opportunity to have the internet in their home, have technology to use the internet, and the availability and skill set to know how to use it. So I think that should be a basic human right, if you would, that we have that. Now, how we get there as a city, as a state and a nation, I don't know that because it's a complex question, but I do believe that it should be considered a basic right, just like having clean water and all those other things are. So I guess that avoids the question in a way, but that's what I believe. And I don't know how we get there, but I believe we can get there if we all work together.
All right, so let's go to Shauna Edson.
That is a very complex question. Ultimately, I would love to see internet be a public utility. I'd love to see all barriers to access eliminated, and everybody actively participating in the digital world. But I think it's not just limited to the availability of the internet. There's a lot of other factors there as well that we need to think about. Are people using technology in ways that they understand? Are they active contributors? Are they helping to program and create technology? So while I do think internet is, and access to the internet is a top priority, I think there's a lot of other things that we need to address as well.
So I said we were going to wrap with closing comments, and I got 3 questions sent to me, folks. So we'll halt those for just a second and offer this up from Samuel on Zoom. Accessing individual students' learning platforms is challenging, given that there are multiple platforms for each student's daily learning. Oftentimes, students forget the various logins and passwords to their classes, leaving them unable to participate in that day's learning. Is there a way to create a single login for teachers and students to access all platforms across the board? It sounds like some opportunity for innovation there. Bridget, give us your insight on all the logins and passwords you got to keep track of in a day.
Well, as I said, I go to about 5 schools, so there are a lot of logins. About making them all the same, since they're in different districts, that makes it a little bit more difficult to get them to all coordinate. I don't think that will be possible unless all the districts get together and they agree to coordinate on that sort of thing. For me personally, it isn't a huge problem. I just use the same username and password for everything that I can. I hope nobody finds out what they are, because then I would be in trouble.
Well, what about a bundled package from a LastPass or something like that? Nate Salazar School District, I'm guessing this has come up a couple of times at school board meetings.
Oh yeah, it certainly has. And, when we were, in a position at the when COVID first hit us last spring, that was one of the biggest challenges we had. It was an emergency response that we were dealing with, and we had teachers using multiple platforms, so you had a lot of different things going on. And I know the struggle and the difficulty that caused for parents and students. So in planning for this school year, regardless of the eventuality, but we did settle on remote learning. The thing that we really focused on was making sure that, I'm not sure if the question comes from a Salt Lake City School District parent or student, but we worked really, really hard to train all of our teachers on a single platform of Canvas. It's one that I'm quite familiar with in my time at the University of Utah. And, we made sure that our teachers were trained. We made sure that, students were trained in the extra 2 weeks. If you're familiar with our timeline and process, we pushed back our school year by 2 weeks to make sure that our students had that interaction. So we had teachers, principals, counselors, every, person that was working in a school out there, making sure that kids were connected, making sure that they were getting enrolled. But that single Canvas access point is something that we worked really, really hard on to make sure was a practice in our school district. And if there are multiple ones, please let me know so that we can address those, or your local school board member, whoever that may be. We're certainly a district with yes in our hearts, and I think we could probably work on that if there still are multiple platforms being used out there. But Canvas for us is the main platform.
Again, COVID and the pressures it's put on families and students for learning brings about another reason why it's important to know who's running for school board. Vote, register to vote. Nate, going to stay with you here because Patrick on Facebook brings up, or highlights a recurring theme through all this, and it's the money, it's the green. It gets to other equity or inequity issues, and does this get us at all into the conversation about a living wage? What are broader issues can our community focus on to address all types of inequity? Nate, I think you're the closest thing to a politician here since you're school board. So that question's to you too.
Got it. Well, I'm certainly not
poverty being a uniting theme when it comes to inequity, right?
Like you, Laura, I'm trying to be a treasurer. Nonetheless, no, I appreciate that question a lot. And absolutely, we should have a living wage. across the board, and not just, a living wage in the realms of disparity, right? Everybody should have a living wage. And along with that, there's a huge highlight that I want to hit on this, especially in these times of COVID, is that, one of the hardest decisions that we have relative to just the safety of everything we're dealing with is that, the number one uninsured population in our city, in our state of Utah, are Hispanic children under the age of 18. So we're not only talking about wages, we're also talking about, healthcare and making sure that people are safe and that they're taken care of if they do find themselves in a situation. And a lot of that comes with your income. It comes with your employment. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. It's a reality, and I believe something like COVID highlighted all of the inequities in our community that we see. When it comes to wages, health insurance, like I mentioned, even in our educational system, we've been talking about inequities in education for years. And no doubt that this experience highlighted it. And everybody's said something along the lines of, like, we're not done, and to what's next. It's we learned, and how do we take what digital learning has provided us, right? We're connecting with kids in a different way. I hear success stories all the time about students who previously were not engaging in class, in in-person class, because they're a little bit more shy, or they sit in the back of the classroom. But these are some of our students who are rock stars now, right? And if they're having the opportunity to speak up and becoming more comfortable among their peers, that only increases their chances of having a higher quality educational experience and getting to that job of a living wage. But certainly in my role as a school board member, we increase that living wage of students by the quality of education that we're giving them. I certainly have a platform and a position to advocate for that with city and county and state leaders, federal leaders as well at times. But certainly a living wage is crucial in all of this, right? Because we have learned how sensitive all of us are relative to our income, our wage, our health insurance, our safety, our education, right? Throughout all of this. So I love that question about a living wage, and we'll always continue to advocate for that.
Our last question here from the digital audience is from Kim on Zoom. How do we make sure seniors are included? With the senior centers closed, many seniors find themselves isolated with limited access, knowledge, and financial resources. And the internet has become such a lifeline to being able to understand how COVID is impacting our community, how to stay safe, where it is affecting you. And when you see the stories about senior living facilities and how they've been impacted, the internet is a crucial lifeline. So Shauna, if you have any comments you want to make about seniors and digital inclusion, much like the city library, those senior centers were closed.
Yeah, seniors are one of the biggest populations in the experience digital divide. So thanks for that question. It's a challenging thing to address right now in the time of COVID, where the city library had partnerships with several senior centers that we were going to regularly with our iPads and our portable computer lab to go and really the thing that we found most seniors want is just help with their devices. They got like a tablet for Christmas, and they want to know how to use Facebook so they can see pictures of their grandkids. Yeah. How do you take that device and change it from being a paperweight to being able to interact with it?
Experience. I gave my father a digital picture frame. Still not using it.
Yeah, so that's something that we're working hard on figuring out. How can we maintain those relationships with seniors when we can't physically interact with them? And actually, Nate has done some pretty fun things with senior centers with his adult services team, but it's not digital.
In his other hat as the city library, he can address that in his closing comments. Any website or a way to get a hold of you?
You can email me at sedson@slcpl.org.
Thank you so much. Aaron, I forgot to ask you, the city has information, I'm sure, at slcgov.com. Any page in particular you want to direct people to?
Yeah, if you would just go to slc.gov under the mayor's page, there's a lot of information there. And if you like other information, you can also email me, first name Aaron, last name Bentley @slcgov.com. I'd be glad to chat with you.
Jacob Brace, Google Fiber. I can't even talk. Jacob Brace, Google Fiber. Final comments and any insights about Google Fibers? You said there's something coming up in a couple of weeks to announce.
Sure.
Come on, spill it. Spill it now.
Our website is fiber.google.com is the quickest way to get to all things related to us. I'm not going to spill it right now because it's an injustice to the NGO who's been working hard, and I want them to have the limelight because it's about their work, not ours. We're just a partner to it. If I could back real quickly, and I don't want to take a ton of time, but your public infrastructure question, should it be a public utility? And I will answer point blank that it depends. Because it works both ways. There are municipalities who are succeeding with a public infrastructure build out. There are other cities that choose not to because they don't want to have to increase their budget through some tax growth in order to be able to maintain an ISP-like service that they actually don't have much skill in, and they have to hire an entire new fleet to maintain and take care of. And then you also have open networks that then can be leased or sold for competition to get into, and maybe that's a different way that works for cities. But the point being is that all three models are out there, as well as the competitive model, so the fourth model, and we just need more of it. It needs to be more access to the fiber optic type of builds that give you greater speed. If you one-time investment in your city, but you've limited yourself by way of an infrastructure that can age, that's going to be problematic and quickly. And so we have to keep moving and progressing into the future. And one of the things that I keep hearing from our answers, as well as the questions, I think do have a starting point that we can all take action on today. And it is the topic of what we're here for, which is digital equity strategies. If you're an organization, if you're a household, you can have a digital equity strategy on how you want to be able to make sure that your grandparent has access to the internet and can get online to do a video call once a week, and you train them up on that, and you cognizantly make that an effort. If you're a nonprofit or even the city, right? Like, we know that there's digital inequity and skill sets at the city. When you hire folks, you have a policy that says we will build the digital skill set of all of our employees to be able to use the minimum platforms that we expect you to use. If you're a school district and you're literally building your digital equity plan in air and you're repairing it in a pandemic, I get it, it's super hard, but you got to make a commitment that from here on out, we have a digital equity strategy on how we communicate to our parents, to our school and unions, to our administration, but most importantly, how we can set up our kids and be successful both online and offline with the skill sets that are needed. So I think that if we all just took time to think about how we're going to reach folks, not just in person, but also through digital resources, and made it a part of the norm, this would start to make incremental success and strides going forward. So I would love to work with folks on that. It's part of what Google Fiber does. Sean is steering up a group with Utah Communities Connect, who is also a great resource for that. Nationally, you can look at the National Digital Influence Alliance. NDIA.org has a great playbook on how to start working on your digital equity plan that Shauna contributed to, and so did Google Fiber. And so resources are out there. We don't have to feel like we're just duct taping and patching as we're going forward. Technology is going to be a part of our lives, regardless of what income level we live at or community we're in. Let's support each other by giving access, devices, and skills.
Jacob Brace from Google Fiber. Nate Salazar, Salt Lake City School Board.
Certainly. So I guess in closing, certainly want to thank everybody for joining us today. My biggest takeaway from this are I talked about the learnable moments, and also want to highlight what Bridget said in the beginning, which is, we're a part of history right now, as providers, as advocates, folks like Shauna and Aaron working for our library in our city, and Bridget, even myself as a school board member, we have experienced, a circumstance that will only increase, education, the value of it and the experience of it for students. Like I mentioned, we're connecting with students in different ways than we ever thought possible before. Like I said, it doesn't come without its challenges. I'm not gonna shy away from that, but we are connecting with kids in different ways, and certainly kids that we haven't connected with before, even in person. I'm excited to know that our students they're hungry for their education, they're hungry to learn, and that they're getting a different skill set. We've talked a lot about skills, all the way down to our kindergartners, to our seniors in high school, are learning a digital platform that can only benefit them moving forward into their educational careers, their professional careers as well. And those are the things that I'm really excited about. I really want to focus on the assets. I certainly want to thank all of our teachers, our administrators in the district for working so hard over the summer, many times and often on their own time, to make sure that they were prepared for this. And certainly all the partners, like I mentioned, Jacob and Aaron and Shauna all participate in the district and our digital inclusion committee, and we wouldn't be able to do what we do. We wouldn't have been able to make the decision that we made to start remote without them, right? Without them supporting us and helping us connect. I am going to plug that, to our students and families who are listening, who are out there, who will hear this down the road. We have devices, we have hotspots. If you need to get connected to the internet, let your principal, let your counselor know. We have the resources to make sure that no kid gets left behind. And we can't do this without your ongoing feedback. And certainly, last but not least, a huge thanks to all of our parents in Salt Lake City. I know our school board and our district has asked the world of you. Please, we can't do what we do without you continuing to reach out with us with your feedback, with your support, and even with your critique. So please keep us posted. And again, just thank everybody and Laura for contributing to our discussion tonight.
Should the internet be a public utility?
I'm with Shauna. I absolutely think that it should. I don't know all the ins and outs of that, so that's just Nate more or less as a library guy and a school board member, community activist and politician, not quite treasurer. But so I don't know all the ins and outs of what that means, but I certainly believe that it is a privilege that everybody should be afforded to. And if it can't, it certainly needs to be something that's affordable to make sure that everybody can participate in our new world. Because I think digital learning, Zoom meetings, it's changed the way we do business. It's changed the way we meet and interact. I am even participating in family functions over Zoom right now. So it's even changing the way our families are connecting. So we have a great opportunity, but even more so of why it should be accessible and affordable for everybody in our community.
Thank you, Nate. Last word is going to go to Bridget Raimundo, our student on the panel tonight. Should the internet be a public utility? What do you want to say to close this down for us in terms of hopes or fears on this issue, Bridget?
Well, I like how Nate said that since I'm not an expert, I can't back up my opinion, but I do believe that internet should be a privilege for everyone. I don't think that we should depend on it as much as we do right now. Too many aspects of our lives are connected with the digital life and how we can put ourselves out there, such as education and career and family life now. And if we could just distance ourselves a little bit from that, I think that would bring more equality to everyone than waiting for internet to be available to everyone. And for my closing words, I would really appreciate it if all the teachers would practice tolerance and patience, both with the online platform and with themselves, to offer their help when they can, because it's really difficult to study from home. It's not as easy as it sounds. For all of our attendees, I'm really thankful that everyone here, including the panelists, are community treasures because they pay attention and they take this discussion very seriously.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, that should be it. Thank you.
All right, Bridget, I hope we didn't keep you out of class since you keep long hours on the computer.
Oh no,
Thank you.
that's
Bridget Raimundo, Aaron
thank you.
Bentley, Shauna Edson, Jacob Brace, and Nate Salazar. Thank you so much. And I want to say thank you to the folks behind the scenes, Poonam Kumar, Brian Young, Elizabeth King, Patrick Hutchins, Rebecca West, and Matt Phillips. Turning this back over to close it out to our MC, Weston Clark, Director of Community Outreach for Salt Lake City Mayor Aaron Mendenhall.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening for the questions and the conversation that will continue well beyond tonight. Thank you to our panel, all treasures, Aaron, Shauna, Jacob, Nate, and Bridget. To our wonderful host, Lara Jones, the Salt Lake City Public Library for the Conversation Series, and to SLC TV for technical and broadcast help. This program will air on SLC TV, Channel 17 on Comcast, on SLC TV's YouTube channel, and it will live on Salt Lake City's government Facebook page. And it is not lost on us that we are having a conversation about digital equity on a digital platform interfacing with social media and cable channels. So we are very grateful for a future airing on KRCL Radio 90.9 FM. Please keep staying safe, social distancing, and wearing those masks. Have a good night, everybody.